This is where it really gets fun. Daily Doug Kazarian is here of Daily Wager fame, weekdays, ESPN 2, 6 p.m. Eastern. Also on weekends during football season.
Sunday, 9 a.m.
Sunday, 9 a.m. So you can get ready for all the football, talk all the bets, which is why Doug Kazarian is here with us. We're going to start with the semifinals. We had kind of touched on it earlier about things that stood out to us. And the lines in the semifinals in particular are telling. Talk about that.
Yeah, this is when the whispers at the water cooler start in the workplace. Who you got? It basically comes down, this might come down to kind of what they say pros versus Joes, the professional bettors versus the average Joes. Because much like we see in the Super Bowl, where the public money, the recreational bettors, that influences and that sort of is a storyline with the national semifinals. It's not just like the action on a Saturday afternoon. This is like the public money. And this line now is 13 with LSU favored, right? And it's going to be a thing where
what did it open up at?
10.
Okay.
Very soft, very quick. It went to like high, actually 9.5 up to double digits. But it comes down to this. The public just remembers what they last saw, which is Oklahoma stumbling down the stretch here, winning these close games, and then LSU just boat racing everyone. So what's the point spread that can get two-way action? And it's now 13. But the professionals, the math model guys, think this is like a 7-8 point margin game. So they're going to be on the underdog here, whereas the public's going to be on LSU.
Well, you see that number. You see 9.5, right? Like the football number's 10. And anytime it's just a little bit underneath that, that would indicate that maybe Vegas is trying to get you to think, well, 10 wins it, but actually the other side would be the play. Is that accurate?
Right. Well, it's a soft number. It comes out. I mean, obviously you can take one respected bet or two respected bets, and then the market starts to solidify. So now it's at 13. It's not like there's been much action. It's just who has been betting it.
Is that a reaction to the sharp money, though?
Yes, the respected money. Fast? They just get a little nibble. The limits are lower. The limits get higher as we get closer to kickoff.
Yeah.
But it's very fascinating just to see, because, again, what did we see yesterday? Right?
Yep.
A team that was a narrow victory over Baylor, and then LSU just crushing Georgia.
McElroy's just trying to figure out how he can get in before the hook comes back. Because there's going to be a hook. There's going to be a hook in this one. Go to the other side. Let's go Clemson, Ohio State.
Well, just again, soft launch, if you want to call it, was Ohio State was a short favorite. Then bets came in. Clemson's about a 1.5, 2-point favorite in the market. And it makes sense, power rating-wise. It's a coin flip game. That's why we're so excited for that game. We all assume LSU is going to win comfortably, but this game is really sort of the toss-up. And it's fascinating just from a fan's perspective. As you guys know, you got one team who's just crushing everyone in the weak competition, and the other team that has done well, crushed a lot of opponents, but also in a much more competitive conference.
Talk about some of the other bowl games and why it is so challenging come bowl season to execute a bet.
That's the fascinating thing to the other bowl games, the non-national semifinal games, just how nuanced point spreads and odds making is, because there's two major unknowns, right? You have motivation. You have teams that miss out, like Utah. How motivated are they going to be for the month off, wondering what could have happened? And then you also have the players, the draftees that's become more prevalent the last couple of years, sitting out. I mean, we look at some of these point spreads. Georgia laying 7.5 to Baylor. In a vacuum, if they're playing on a neutral site middle of the season, it'd probably be like 13. But because they expect Georgia to have a few players sit out, and then last year in the Sugar Bowl, Georgia, as a double-digit favorite, lost outright to Texas because one team wanted to be there. The other team was still thinking about the narrow loss in the SEC title game. And so you have all these situations. And odds making, it's now become like NFL preseason, where it's a race to get information. Last year, you saw Will Grier, sort of a late news started surfacing about his missing that bowl game. Huge line move because they were relegated, I think, to a third-string quarterback. So there's just going to be a race for information, much like NFL preseason betting is. And an odds maker told me this quote. He goes, Alabama, Michigan, because they're facing off in a bowl game. Alabama, Michigan should have lower betting limits than Pitt, Eastern Michigan. And you wouldn't think that. You think the lesser names, but because you don't know who's going to play, literally who's going to play, power rating for Alabama is tough right now without Tua. They don't really know how to power rate them. And then Michigan could have some guys missing. And then the motivation factor, obviously Alabama used to playing in the college football playoffs. So that's just funny. But you know Pitt, Eastern Michigan are going to show up and want to play. So it's just very difficult. And you have these kind of wonky lines that are very elastic, to borrow an economics. And they're going to move. They're going to fluctuate based on all the news that's surfacing.
Yeah, to me, you hit the nail on the head when you talked about motivation. Yeah. That's what's so interesting with these bowl games. When you're talking about it from a player's perspective, because I was at the Sugar Bowl last year, Georgia played Texas. Georgia didn't want to be there.
No.
Like, I don't care what anybody says. First off, the first-round pick, DeAndre Baker, he was like, I'm checking out. I'm going to be a first-round pick. I'm not even playing in the game. I saw the line for Georgia-Baylor. I was like, oh, I like Baylor. Because Matt Rule, who we just got off the phone with a little while ago, his players are going to for sure want to be there.
Those guys won one game a few years ago.
It won one game a few years ago. But think about this. If you're in Waco or a Baylor person, it's the biggest game Baylor has seen in a decade. I mean, this is huge.
We did a segment last week. We talked about teams that we're going to want to bet on or fade or bet against once the bowl lineups are announced on Sunday. And one team we all throw is Louisville. I mean, this is a team that was just a disaster at the end of last year. New coach, Satterfield comes in. They are bowl eligible.
Yeah.
You know they're showing up in their bowl game.
Yep.
You know, things
What's
like
that line?
I got to scour, Matt.
Yeah.
That's
the most random
wants to circle it.
It's a random game.
I'm trying to find some good.
He's got all 40 bowl game lines memorized. Right?
Oh, I got the pop-up ads covering it. All sorts of stuff everywhere.
All right, I'll take you off the hook on that one.
But the other interesting thing I think to consider is the teams that are hard to prepare for. Last year I called the Houston game versus Army.
Oh.
And I was looking, I was like, man, Houston's about to get rolled. And I knew they were about to get rolled because Army's a game of discipline. Playing a zone read, a triple option type of team, you have to be disciplined. The games leading up to that, Houston had about 3 offsides penalties defensively. If you really look at the tape, you realize if you can't even watch when the quarterback says Hutton snaps the ball, you sure as heck can't realize do you have the running back or the fullback or the receivers. So when you're looking at teams like Air Force, Army, any of those triple option zone read teams, man, those are the other ones that are really tricky and interesting.
See, but that's the thing is last year it was so obvious, right? It was so obvious to the public. Georgia Tech and Paul Johnson's swan song. He's going to go
There's
out.
also those stories, yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, the narratives
They're
are a
gonna
huge
go
part of
out,
handicapping.
And they're going to win. It's a triple option. There's no way anybody can stop the triple option. They're playing better down the stretch. Georgia Tech coming into that game north of a touchdown favorite. Minnesota crushed them.
Yeah.
And what did Minnesota parlay that performance into? A great 2019 season. So I guess how do you evaluate those teams that are a little nuanced, like an air raid versus a triple option in a bowl game?
And one more, and on that with the coaching, like for instance, Memphis now going through a coaching transition to Mike Norvell, like things like that.
Well, there are unknowns, right? So there is stuff that hits the news kind of wire. We talked about like a Will Grier situation last year. That's not baked into a line. So we have a segment called numbers versus narrative.
Yeah.
So there's a narrative, whether it be the coach's last thing, the coach. A lot of people thought maybe Lane Kiffin was worried about his next job, wouldn't be focused on the game plan for Sunday's championship.
Would they drop 60
Obviously,
something?
they blew him out, right? So there's sometimes that are narratives, and whatever those are, whether it be like down the final 4 weeks of the NFL regular season, teams that are more motivated versus teams that are, that's already in the line. You see teams, there's already a tax on that team, so to speak, on that point spread. And then, look, it's a round sphere with 2 points. Sometimes it's just random, and we want to take a narrative after the game and make it fit with the outcomes. Like you said, Minnesota launching to next season. Sometimes there is. But I remember you guys were just talking to Mac Brown. I remember there was a Holiday Bowl about, 8-10 years ago where they wanted to use that bowl game as a launching pad for the next season, and they were awesome in that game. So you have to dig deep, read the internet, and find those quotes because the reporters are obviously putting them out there. But it is completely nuanced, and it's a different animal than the regular season.
How much did Daily Doug just show his Ivy League education?
He loved it.
He talked about baking in lines, elastic, and a tax on something. This is great. That's that Brown education.
It's just like Wall Street.
He did not use trajectorying.
He did not.
Like you did.
See, that's the difference. We got 3 Power 5s and an Ivy League. That's the difference in all this right there. Doug Kazarian, Daily Wager, weekday 6 p.m. Eastern on ESPN2. It's a good time. There might be some elasticity in the